I can't think of anything we've done at Skyscanner that's been so effective at getting people to do the things that we all know you should do.
Hey, hello there. Welcome back to the Bottleneck Guy podcast with me, Clark Ching, the self-proclaimed Bottleneck Guy. Today, I am talking with a really good friend of mine, Les Allen, who lives in Scotland in a lovely little place called Bathgate, which is just outside Edinburgh. Les works at... Well, actually, I'm going to let Les tell you all about where he works and what he does. And I'm not going to tell you what we talk about, except that if you don't listen to this, you will be worse off. Hello, Les.
Hi, Clark. How are you?
I'm very good. I've had too much coffee this morning. How about you? Are you well over there?
I am. It's quite a bit later in the evening, so I'm on the decaf by now.
Ah, that's a good idea. So you're in Scotland. I'm in New Zealand. Tell me a bit about yourself.
Okay, so I have the great fortune to work at Skyscanner. I've worked there for coming up on 5 years now, and I've really enjoyed it. It's a really challenging place to work. There are some really awesome people, a lot of really awesome people. So imposter syndrome is quite common, but I think it keeps us all on our edge. So I have a lot of fun there. Skyscanner is a travel companion, so we help people find out how to get to the places they want to get to, and some of what to do when they get there as well. It's an app. We have a website as well, but more and more, like everything, the app is being used more often than the website itself now. And it helps you search for great deals on flights, on hotels, on car hire, and we can tell you about the destinations and stuff as well.
I know that because I use it all the time. But just for the audience who might not have heard of it. Now, Skyscanner, you would just think, you go, little app, okay, 5 computer nerds in a dungeon somewhere typing away furiously. What's it like in reality?
It used to be 5 dudes in a dungeon, but the dungeon was a flat in Leith when it started 16, 17 years ago. When I joined it, I think 10, 12 years later, something like that, it was up to 750 odd people.
Wow.
And we're now at almost double that, I think, at about 1,500 people. Half of those are engineers. So I'm in Edinburgh, and we have offices in a lot of places across the world. So we have Edinburgh, Glasgow, and London in the UK. We have Barcelona, Budapest, and Sofia elsewhere in Europe. We have a commercial and marketing office in Miami. We have an office in Singapore, which is a bit sort of engineering, a bit commercial. And we have a big engineering base in Shenzhen as well.
So slightly more than 5 people in a dungeon. What's your job title?
Currently, I'm a director of lean operations at Skyscanner. That's what you were expecting me to say, right?
Well, I don't know. The lean bit surprised me. Skyscanner uses theory of constraints.
Amongst a whole lot of other things, yeah. Yeah, and it's waxed and waned over the years as well. There was a time, I think, 2014, where Skyscanner actually did the classic thing of buy everyone a copy of the goal and send them home for the afternoon to go and read it. So that was a year or two before I joined. So when I joined, a lot of people understood about it. There were internal training courses which we ran, which our conversations helped us build on as well, Clark. So we, very thankful for that as well. We started building into not just the flow stuff, but also current reality trees and future reality trees. We dipped our toe into goal trees here and there as well, but we never really quite found the home for goal trees. But current reality trees we've spent a bit of time with, and quite a lot of time on the flow and the 5 focusing steps.
So we had a chat before this, and we thought, what on earth can we talk about?
Yeah.
We thought we'd settle on, I'm going to misremember the name, reliability.
So it's dependability. And this is something we've been working on. We've been working on for probably about 6, maybe 7 months now. And it's been a focus mainly in our with our engineering teams. We've started to talk about it with our product and our design people as well. And it's underpinned by one of Skyscanner's core values of we keep our promises. Right. So that's what we've been doing the last 6 years, and it really came out of thinking about that we need to continually improve. We need to continually drive forwards. We're continually playing against bigger and bigger, faster and faster competitors. So we need to perform our very best. And everyone at Skyscanner really wants to do that. So with our company, we're sort of always pushing an open door when we talk about improving and stretching our muscles and that kind of stuff. So that's easy. The question is, how do you get people to think about stretching the right muscles and exercising them in the right way? So we started talking about dependability, as I said, back in October. It's the second rung on the ladder where in Google's Project Aristotle. So the first rung that everyone remembers is psychological safety, and everyone gets very, very focused on that. And then I think people probably start to wane off a little bit as you go up through the other rungs of that ladder. But the second one is dependability, which is basically keeping your promises. It's doing what you say you will do.
Cool. Doing what you said you would do. Okay, that's good. Could we pull back a little bit and tell me about the Google stuff?
So it's all open source. I think it's all on the Google Rework website. So if you Google that, you will definitely find it. And Google did a fairly scientific study a couple of years back on what defined a high performing team, and they concluded that the most important thing in this list was psychological safety. That the team had the ability to be honest and frank with each other and be able to broach difficult topics, be able to disagree and commit, all of that kind of stuff. And they found there was a bunch of other stuff as well. So the other things on the list, the second thing, as I said, is dependability, which is about being able to get things done on time, to a certain quality level, being able to deliver the things you say you will deliver to other people so they can pick up the baton and move on. Then it's about having structure and clarity, clear roles, ways of working, all that kind of stuff within the team. That the work has meaning to people and people are engaged with it. That it's personally important. This stuff isn't rocket science, but it's great to see it underpinned by a fairly deep scientific study in a single organization. But it's been taken to heart by a lot of folks. And then the fifth one is impact, that the work actually matters and has an impact. People can understand where it impacts, for the company, but also for the wider world and the wider sort of the global community. Right. So people can understand if a team has that, then they're more likely to be highly high performing.
Okay, that makes good sense. So it's Google Rework. I just Googled it and I found the page you're talking about. So what does that look like in the real world for you guys?
So we had a conversation about this. We got our tribe leads together. I should mention we, as part of that, send everybody home and read the goal exercise 5-6 years ago. Skyscanner forked the Spotify model. I say forked because we took inspiration from it, and we have continued to deviate and iterate it in our own way. So we still talk about squads and tribes. We don't talk about guilds quite so much, and whatever the fourth thing is that they had, chapters. But we're still talking about squads and tribes. The core idea of being that you've got groups who are multidisciplinary, they've got all the people in that group they need to be able to deliver, and they've got a purpose and an objective that they're working to. So we got our tribe leaders together to talk about dependability, what it actually meant for our squads. So there's the individual part of it, that I keep my promises to the people that I work with, that if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. But then there's the squad level. What does that mean? And what we came to was that from 1 week to the next, if you said you were going to do something as a squad, you did all of those things. Not 80% of those things, you did all of those things. So that made it a really nice, quite binary measure. You commit to these 5 things, and did you do all of those 5, or did you not do all of those 5? Because if I'm getting something from you next week, and I need to know whether you're going to deliver it or not, and having an 80% chance that you'll deliver it maybe isn't quite good enough. So we need to know that those handoffs are going to work. The bar that we were shooting for all of our teams was in 8 weeks out of 10, you would deliver all of the things you set out to deliver. Because we've got to allow some space. Because we're working in a complex environment. Many of our teams are working in spaces where there are unknown unknowns, where they're doing stuff in the organization for the first time. There are going to be spaces where people need to take on risks, and they might not get those things done. But we also need to encourage people to to think ahead enough that from 1 week to the next you can get those things done. Maybe your plan further out from there is less certain, but when you're just planning the next 5 days, that is quite certain. And that's the bar we set.
I like that. I particularly like the binary version of it because it is very clear.
It made it so much more simple.
So what happens if you over-deliver? Can you over-deliver, or do you get beat? Do you go around and beat people upstairs? You said you'd do 5, and you did 7. That's disgraceful. Slap.
So we used at the same time we were picking this up. We were all the company was also picking up OKRs, which is a whole other conversation. Yep. But OKRs are now bound up in a book by John Doerr called Measure What Matters. So we decided we were going to measure dependability, and we measure it as a binary. It's either a 1 or a 0. So you either delivered all the 5 things you said you were going to deliver that week, and you delivered those 5. You might have delivered another 2 things, but the measure doesn't care. Yeah. The measure, if you delivered 6 things, but only 4 of them were the things you said you deliver, you still only get a 0. Because we weren't counting on you to deliver the other 2 things. The system wasn't counting on you to deliver the other 2 things. When we started talking about it, I realized there was a TOC aspect to this. If you think about dependent events and statistical variation, at the time we started this, we had 92 development teams. Most of them are outward facing, and that they deploy stuff all the way to the traveler. But a lot of them are dependent on other people to deploy other things to travelers or partners at the same time. So you've got all these little flows going on between all these teams. And if you have teams that are only delivering what they say will deliver 25% of the time, then you have very high statistical variations in that system. Yeah. By increasing dependability, we reduce that statistical variation, which makes that system easier to manage and makes the whole system more predictable. If you think about it, that system actually changes more regularly than a manufacturing line. In that as these teams' goals ebb and flow and change and shift, the flows of work from teams to other teams changes. So it's very hard to predict where the bottleneck's going to be from 1 week to the next. But just by getting everybody more dependable, it means the work flows better from wherever it's flowing to wherever it's flowing from.
And you naturally have a lot less work in process because people will deliberately limit it. In fact, when I worked with General Electric, almost 10 years ago now, we put in something similar to this, which was a say-do measure. It was put in as a reaction to people never, ever being dependable, or always over-committing and always under-delivering. So we put in that measure, and instantly their backlogs all got tidied up. Everything got cleaned up. There was much more visibility of what was going on.
We found exactly the same thing, that just by focusing on this single measure, we found that despite a whole pile of training, recruiting really smart, intelligent, experienced people, documenting a whole pile of stuff about how squads can and should work, and people sharing blogs about the ways they work in their squads, and all those sorts of things. I can't think of anything we've done at Skyscanner that's been so effective at getting people to do the things that we all know you should do, than just talking about this single measure. Because as you say, people, you start talking about the importance of doing what you say you will do, and people naturally say, well, hang on, we're not going to take in 10 things this week. We're going to take in 5 and make sure we get them all done. And those 5 things we're going to take in. As squad lead, I'm going to look at those 5 things 3 days before the sprint starts and make sure they're all ready, and go and work with my product manager to make sure they're ready. And we'll go to that other team and line up those things that they need to have ready for us, so we can get them working. And team members stop picking up extra work halfway through the sprint because they finish their work. They start helping other people finish the work that they've got. So all these things that you and I and other agile coaches and scrum masters and stuff will talk about being effective all the time, just started springing back up again because we were focusing on this single measure, which was really nice, because people knew why they were doing it, because they focused on the outcome, rather than following sort of the book guidance, which some people have a reticence about, following all the implementing all the meetings and implementing all the assets and all that kind of stuff. doesn't feel like it's going to be the most effective thing.
Okay, so cool. I love what you're saying there. It makes perfect sense to me. So let's explore, how does a team figure out what's the right amount to commit to?
A lot of this stuff we left them to work out that answer themselves. We gave them a little bit of guidance. We said it was important that you should deliver on what you said you would deliver, and we started just pointing out the data they had available to them. So they had the data in Jira. Skyscanner is a dispersed organization, so we use Jira for almost everything. So they've got data in there. If they've been estimating stuff, they've got estimation data. If they haven't got estimation data, they've got ticket count data which they can look at. People started estimating again in some cases because they realized it was important to understand the size and complexity of the work. We had this great conversation sometime in late November about understanding and estimating complexity. So we shared Liz Keogh's Capability Red blog around, and people started using her Capability Red scale in their planning sessions to understand the level of complexity. And if they had one highly complex thing, they would do that first, and they would take less stuff in to make space for the unknowns and all of that kind of stuff. Working out how much you should commit to isn't rocket science, but knowing that you need to do it is important. And once you know you need to do it, the people in our teams are generally smart enough to work out the ways of doing it.
That's good. And generally, the mantra I've always used is undercommit, overdeliver, and when you get lucky, you just pull stuff forward.
And you and I would think that would be common sense, but we found there was another piece of common sense going on, which was the concept of big, hairy objectives. So people would regularly take in twice the amount of work that they could feasibly do in a sprint, because this time we're going to try really hard, and this time we're going to get 60% of this stuff done rather than just 50% like last week. And we're going to have it all ready. And people were regularly planning to do twice as much than they have done any time in the last 5 to 10 weeks. How demoralizing is that if you're in a team and every single week you haven't done maybe more than half of the stuff that you committed to?
You're constantly failing.
Yeah. And the other thing is you get used to that state, and you don't learn from it because you get used to missing 50% of your plan. So therefore there's no inspection trigger because missing 50% of the plan is normal. So therefore there's no reason to have a conversation about why we missed 50% of the plan, because missing 50% of the plan effectively was the plan. So there's no inspection.
I was just talking to someone yesterday about this being a problem for projects. You get that same problem that in organizations where projects always run late, no one expects a project to deliver on time. And when it runs late, everyone makes sad faces, frowns a bit, and then sort of quietly shrugs to themselves because that was what's expected. Whereas if you have a belief that projects will deliver on time, you will behave very, very differently. Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but the meaning of the word deadline came from Civil War prisoner of war camps. They would get stones and put them around the prison, and that would act as the wall, because if you crossed that deadline, you got shot. Right. I'm not saying that we should shoot people.
Yeah, I think Ruth, our chief people officer, would have a word or two with us about
probably.
That. But I think having the line is important.
Do you beat people up?
So this is another thing. So there was a concern when we started this that people would get beaten up, and that, metaphorically speaking, people would be worried about recording a zero. Because there would be negative consequences if they, for them, for their team, or for them if they did it. And we have I think we have a really strong culture. We have a very empathetic culture. We generally have a very trusting and open culture at Skyscanner, and a lot of people find it very, very easy to share concerns. We have actually recently, with the things that have been going on in the world, we've been having two town halls with our execs a week. And you can ask our exec teams on these calls pretty much any question you like, and you'll generally get a really well considered, honest answer straight off the cuff. It's very rare that they won't answer a question. So I think that sets a really good tone for the companies. But even with that culture, there was a concern that if we started marking teams as sort of, well, you failed that sprint and you failed that sprint, that people would then people would be fearful of marking their sprints as zero, and then people would start sandbagging their estimates, all that kind of stuff. we realized that the only way to prove to people that they won't get hit with a stick is to not hit them with the stick. Yeah. So you can promise not to hit them with the stick as much as you like, but to a certain extent, the real proof in the pudding comes with the first or second zero they record, and then they have to see how you're going to react to it. Oh, good. What have you learned? What might you do differently? How was your retrospective? How can I help you next time? Was it something external? There's, chances are, there was maybe something from an enabling or supporting team that you needed, or maybe heaven forbid you needed something from your manager and they didn't get it to you.
Yes.
All these sorts of things. So there's all these opportunities to go and ask, what help do you need? What support do you need?
And they can not only improve, they calibrate as well. So next time they go, actually, maybe we're a little bit more gung-ho than we should be. Let's slow down a little bit, or let's not slow down. That's actually wrong, because you don't slow down. Yeah. You just you commit for less.
Yeah. Was it you who said to me a couple of weeks ago? Was it somebody else who said there's an old phrase which is slow is smooth and smooth is fast? Was that you a couple of weeks ago, Clark?
Yeah, that was me. I've been trying to come up with language that describes this idea of slow down to speed up. And what I found to start with is best to actually say it the other way around. Speed up by slowing down a little bit. Whereas if you're constantly going too fast, you cut corners, you have to fix stuff. And you're effectively not in control, as in the sense of if you're driving a car, it's good to be in control of the car, otherwise you crash. And I found it lovely. I just stumbled across it. I remember this Paul Hollywood, the baker chap that's on the television show. Mm-hmm. Once he earned a lot of money from being a successful TV baker, he went and he started driving in Le Mans, I think it's, and he was going around the racetrack.
Oh, really?
And he went and he talked to Sterling Moss as part of a TV program. And so Sterling Moss was the great, I'm not sure if it was the 50s, 60s, 70s, but he was a great racing driver. And he goes and asks him for advice. And he says, what one piece of advice would you give me for when I'm out there on the racetrack? And Sterling looks at him and says, well, just go a little bit slower around the corners than you think you can. Because otherwise you crash and you get egg on your face. But that was his advice, just to go a little bit slower, and then you go faster. Another question for you. You've got a big company. You've got all these dependencies between teams, and have you got a way of noticing systemically who's not dependable? Because I imagine it only takes sometimes one area to have quite a lot of knock-on effect to other areas.
Yeah, so we put a couple of things in place. So we asked the tribe leads to report each week on the simple binary measure. So we then are able to coalesce all that information together for all of our 92 squads across our 14 or 15 tribes. Mm-hmm. So we can see that week on week. We can't see the connections in between them in that data, but we can see the clusters of teams that are struggling. And we can then go and have conversations, either one-to-one or as a group, as to what are the common themes there. So the other thing we put in place is a 1 hour each week meeting with our tribe leads to talk about the issues pertaining to dependability. And sometimes we'd use the data to drive it, and sometimes we would just ask some open questions and then ask people to contribute. And we established this shared collaboration space that didn't really exist in the same sort of form as before. So our tribe leads could share the issues they were seeing in their tribes, and we could say, oh, actually, I just solved that issue with my school, with my other school, one of my squads over here last week. Here's what I did, and maybe here's the notes I made for myself before I went into that chat. So here you go, that. Here you go, you can have that. Or actually, we've got the same thing. So maybe actually a few tribe leads are going to get together and talk about this issue they're seeing in a few squads, and seeing if we can get some people together to talk about that particular issue. Or as you say, maybe there's an issue. There were a few where a single sort of dependency chain failed, and impacted several squads. And in those cases, we tried to get those, the tribe leads or some of those folks in those squads together to look at what happened, to see if we see what we can learn from it. And so that open meeting each week just sort of got us close enough to the data that we could identify some of those systemic things. Now we've been doing it for 6 months. The data's starting to separate out. So we've now got 3 groups of tribe. One group generally consistently okay. One group that's sort of bobbing up and down some in the middle, and another group that's struggling a bit more. So we're starting to focus a bit more on those groups and have sort of slightly more focused conversations in those spaces. But by pulling that data in, it keeps us all focused, and it keeps the focus on it as well. People are having to come in each week and put. It's not onerous, it's just if you've got 6 squads, it's make sure you know the answers to those questions, for the answer to that single question for each of those squads, and take 2 or 3 minutes each week to open the spreadsheet and put in the put in 6 ones or zeros, and then you're done.
Okay.
So it's become part of the rolling cadence from one week to the next for all of our tribes. So they all have this conversation somewhere in their tribe, in their tribe cadence about, did you deliver on your goals this week or not?
I like that.
And it's good for people to be asked that, because if you don't get asked if you delivered on your goals each week, then does delivering on your goals each week matter if no one actually asked?
So you've got a number. It's a very simple number. It's simple to, it could be very simple to game it if you wanted to, but because you trade on the psychological safety, and it is just a number. You don't get beaten up for it. It's just a measurement. It's not something that your bonus is related to.
Yeah, no, it's not. So it's certainly not directly linked to your bonus or your performance review. It's not completely disconnected either, because if you were the squad lead of a squad that had been continually not dependable for the best part of a 6-month period, and you hadn't done much about it, that's probably going to have an impact on your performance review. We're going to have a conversation. Really, you should have had your tribe lead should have had a conversation with you well before it got to the end of the 6-month period, but it's not going to have no impact at all. Similarly, if you've been a squad lead of a squad who have been undependable for 6 months, but you've been dealing with one issue after another, and you've nailed one after another, then that performance review is going to look totally different. So it's not directly connected, but it's not unconnected either. And people understood that. I think the other reason why it didn't get sandbagged too much, I'm going to say too much, because I'm not going to say there was no sandbagging at all across 92 squads, because there probably was in a few places at some times. But the other thing, if we go back to what we talked about Project Aristotle right at the beginning, about meaning and engagement and purpose, if people are engaged in the goal they are going for, I believe they are less likely to sandbag.
Yes. Because
that was the reason they were overcommitting in the first place. They were overcommitting because they understood the importance of the goal, and they wanted to achieve the goal, and they wanted to get there as fast as possible, and they were just potentially going about it in a different way. But if people understand the purpose, understand the impact of the organization, and I mentioned we're going back to OKRs at Skyscanner at the moment, and that's part of it. Having a clear strategy that people can understand. People know why what we're doing is important. We've got a great exec team who really, when it comes to it, are able to really speak from the heart about why it's important that Skyscanner does what it does for millions and millions of travelers around the world. If we don't do what we're going to do, who else is going to do it?
I would like to actually talk about estimating, because your comment that people have started estimating again made me smile, because I think estimating in an environment where there is psychological safety is such a useful tool for productivity. And some of our agile thought leaders have made it hard for people to estimate or given them permission not to. And I'd love to talk about that.
I think there's that. It's the same and it's the same with planning as well. That people felt that in some ways people felt that the whole planning being on the right hand side of the manifesto. People think, oh, I don't need to plan anymore, and that extends all the way down to my sprint plan. But actually, planning is still very important. Dependability for us put the onus back on the right amount of planning to get just enough planning to nail the next 5 days worth of delivery. That's all. And then once you're nailing 5 days worth of delivery, then you can start talking about nailing the next month and the next 3 months worth.
So maybe we talk about that next. But sorry, I'm just hooking you in now as a public commitment. That you now can't get away because you're lined up for the future sometime soon. Okay, let's wrap this up. Cool. Thank you, Les. Thank you very much. If people want to contact you, what would they do?
I'm at Laz Allen on Twitter. It's probably the easiest place to get in contact.
At LazAllen.
Cool.
Laz, thank you very much over in Scotland. You go to bed now, and we will talk again.